The round shall be of 80 minutes, which shall be inclusive of the caucus, and it will be followed by the judges' feedback, which shall be of 10 minutes. Any one of the teams or the mediators can ask for the private caucus. Whichever party is deciding to have the caucus first shall stay in the meeting, and the other party will be directed to the waiting room. And then they'll be called back again when the caucus of the first party has ended. So there is no specific time limit for the caucus per team. The warning for the time will be provided in the chat twice. The first warning will be provided when 70 minutes have elapsed, and the last warning when 75 minutes have elapsed. The teams are requested to abide by the time limits prescribed, and there shall be no extension of the time in any rounds. All participants must have an internet connection sufficient to smoothly run Cisco WebEx. And lastly, in any case a participant loses connection, they are required to inform the organizers immediately, and they shall be provided a 10 minutes of buffer to resolve the issue, failing which the opposition will be given a walkover. So there's that. And if there are no queries to be addressed and no issues regarding anything, we will start the rounds.
Yes, whenever you're ready. Yeah.
Okay. Can all of you just unmute yourselves, and then we'll commence the rounds.
Yeah, I said whenever you're ready.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Time is ticking.
Hello and good evening everyone to this mediation session here today. I'd like to thank all the judges, my co-mediator and my fellow parties present here for this mediation session on a Sunday evening. I hope everyone's happy, well and safe. Before we go into the specifics and address how the mediation session will go, let us just start with our self-introductions, and please unmute yourselves and tell us who you are and what would you like to be referred as. My co-mediator, can you go ahead please first?
Yes. Thank you so much, Akhil, for allowing us to introduce ourselves. Before I sort of allow the parties to introduce themselves, I would just like to thank all the parties for being here today in this evening to discuss this issue. Mediation in the past has proven to be quite a useful tool in terms of both time and cost, and mediation agreements are generally known to be honored. So, and apart from that, Akhil and I have a lot of experience and certifications with respect to mediation, so you can be assured that you are in safe hands. Now, I would request the parties, starting with the government side, to introduce themselves, and Akhil will take it forward until he passes it back.
Certainly. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, everyone, depending on where you are. I am Donald Draper, and I am the Foreign Secretary representing the Government of India.
My salutations to everyone as well. I am Mr. Doctor, and I am the Minister of Law here along with my Foreign Secretary.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Anjali Garg, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Reliable Deep Sea JV. You can refer to me as Anjali. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone here. I'm General Counsel for Deep Sea Reliable JV. My name is Avni Sharma. You can refer to me as Ms. Sharma or Counsel for Deep Sea Reliable JV, and my preferred pronouns are she and her. Thank you.
That was very well introduced. I'd like to thank both the parties for introducing themselves, and a special thanks for choosing us as your mediators and choosing mediation as a process of settling your dispute. Before that, if you have any queries or any concerns regarding the session or throughout the session, the 80-minute duration, please feel free to unmute yourself or private text me. We'll look into that. After that, I hope everyone's well and safe in these trying times. If this session would have been on table, if this would have been offline, we would be discussing these issues on tea or drinks or anything like that. But sadly, it's not happening right now. But on a positive note, it's all happening because of technology, and we're here safe and looking forward for positive outcomes with a very positive mindset. After that, I would like to, though the parties have been through a lot of mediation sessions in the before, it lies on my part to tell you what a mediation is and what we as mediators are going to do for today. First of all, mediation is a voluntary process. You are here present in this mediation screen on your free will and you're not forced by anyone. That also shows your willingness to resolve the conflict, and that in no way doesn't denote your guilt or any mistake from the part of your side. And secondly, and the most important aspect of a mediation session is perhaps confidentiality. Anything you say in this room stays in this room, and me and my co-mediator may be taking notes at some points, but any proof of destruction for the notes, we're happy to provide. My co-mediator Jay will further in his address tell you about what confidentiality is and what aspects does it hold. Anything, firstly, and also the most important thing is to understand the difference between what a litigation process is and how mediation works. You are here with the parties and not against the parties. So that the wording very itself denotes what a mediation really is. You're here with a collaborative and positive mindset to understand each other's concerns and look forward for positive and bright outcomes. If the mediation, what a mediation session is really explained, we as mediators are neutral third parties. We do not hold any interest in the outcome or the process of this session throughout this session. And we as mediators, our duty is to guide you and facilitate the discussion to avoid any discrepancies or any irrespectful behavior. Our duty is just to facilitate and guide you through this session. If I would like to put it in a normal comparison or a metaphorical way, we mediators are the lamps that you hold in a dark cave, and it's free for you to take the lamps anywhere on the darkest end or to the brightest end. At the end of the day, it's you as the clients and the counsel that are going to live with your solutions, that are going to live with the problems as well. That is why, on an ending note, I'd like to implore both the parties to think creatively and use us as your mediators effectively so that we can give our best and you can obtain the best too. My co-mediator Jay will further tell you what confidentiality and what aspects does it hold, and will tell you about what the procedure really is. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Atul, for very nicely summarizing what mediation is and what the role of a mediator is. When we were introducing the parties, we did not, I think, understand whether they have the authority to settle in this case. I think that is something we missed out on. So quickly, if the parties could confirm from both sides, the government side and then the joint venture side, whether they do indeed have the authority to settle in today's mediation.
Certainly, we have complete authority to take any and all decisions necessary.
Thank you. I do have the authority to settle today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So that being said, before I move into the process of what's going to happen today, just quickly a word on confidentiality. As mentioned, confidentiality is key to mediation. It is a very, it's a key tenet that, and anything that is discussed today will not be revealed to others. Any notes that me and my co-mediator Akhil take today will be destroyed. You can see that the meeting is being recording. The recording will also be deleted by the end of today's session. So please note that you can feel free to voice your concerns. This is an arena and a space for you to sort of bounce around ideas, have a lot to talk about. So as parties, remember that you are here in good faith. Good faith means keeping an open mind, listening to what the other parties have to say. We encourage you to not stick to positions, rather to go and negotiate based on interests. This means we would like you to ask questions, try to understand what the other side, what are the interests of the other side, and possibly based on that, carry on your negotiation. Great. Now I will move into what is going to happen in today's session. Right. Today, considering both the parties have mutually agreed to come to this mediation session, we will allow one party. We would allow the government to possibly start first, and then the joint venture. This is, remember that we are neutral. So in case another party wants to start first, feel free to let us know. After this, we will, based on your opening statements, we will have an agenda that we will set out. Me and my co-mediator will sort of state the interests and make an agenda sheet. Post which we will move into the conference session. In this conference session, we will move through each agenda item that was settled upon. If I just request that the parties please stick to each agenda point and not shift between agenda points, because then what happens is we might lose the utility of today's mediation. At any point, if there is an impasse, then the parties can feel free to call a caucus. Me and my co-mediator can also call a caucus. If we call a caucus with one team, we call a caucus with another team. Two, during this private caucus, what happens is there is a second layer of confidentiality, which I already mentioned. So anything that is discussed here between me and the parties, or me and my co-mediator and the parties, will not be revealed unless you explicitly allow us to do so. So think of it like walking into an open balcony, taking a deep breath, fresh air, sort of thinking about all the options, bouncing it off with us mediators, and I'm sure it will be of use. Once this is done, we will move back to the conference session, and by the ending, if we come to some sort of a settlement, the mediators will help the councils for both parties to draft this settlement. Please do remember the settlement will have to go through the chain of authorities as per law. Based on your jurisdiction, it may differ. In India, we will it requires, for instance, the Stamp Registration Act for the settlement to be also registered under the Stamp Registration Act. So once all these chain of authorities are done, this mediation agreement will be binding. I would just like to finally state before I pass it to my co-mediator that nothing is agreed to until everything is agreed to in today's mediation. So please note that if you just agree to a certain bunch of things, but not other things, you are not bound by them unless we are finished agreeing to sort of everything. We can always meet in a further session if today's session does not completely meet your expectations, or if you do not finish the agenda points. So over to you, Mr. Co-mediator, if you would like to add anything, and then you can possibly ask the parties to begin with the opening statement.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. That was very well said. On a basic etiquette part of it, please mute yourself when you're not speaking, and please allow the party to speak. Do not interrupt each other so that you hold respect for each other as well. I think if that's said enough, and if the parties do not have any concerns or questions, I think it's fair enough to begin with the opening statements from the Government of India's side. Client of the Government of India, please go ahead.
Surely. Thanks a lot. First of all, I'd like to thank both the mediators for setting up the structure and explaining it so very well. And I'd like to thank both the parties to agreeing to having a discussion in the first place to resolve any and all conflicts. In my past experience with mediation, it has been the most and the best mechanism in order to resolve any and all disputes. Now, before we get into the incident that took place, I believe it's better, just for the sake of knowledge and just to make sure that we're both on the same page, to go about a little bit of company history. So in case I am incorrect or wrong at any place, feel free to correct me. Now, from what I understand, Deep Sea is a United States-based construction company who's engaged by Reliable Offshore Limited to first of all conduct a survey in the Bay of Bengal region, and then later on they entered into a joint venture to construct a plant in the same area for oil extraction and an offshore rig. This is the basic and the history of the companies. And as we are Indians who have the great slogan Atithi Devo Bhava, we believe that all guests are equal to God, and we welcome new businesses always with open arms, and that's how we approach this business venture as well, and that's how we allowed them to go forward with their project, and all of the process were completed properly. Well, the incident that has led us to being here is specifically the oil spill that happened. Now, I believe it is my understanding that there were some structural flaws in the construction of the project that at the site of the offshore drilling site. And as a result of that, there has been a rapidly growing oil leak in the area. Now, all signs indicate that this isn't just a small thing that can be brushed off. It could be one of the largest in the past few decades that we've ever seen. And it is not just the incident itself, but also the things that are starting to attach itself with the incident, be it the force and the reactions of the people in our own country, or the global attention that it has received. Now, this is something that is very dear to us, considering the fact that we treasure our environmental resources. We treasure the way we also have utmost respect for the way the world perceives us. And any and all decisions I take today will be affected by these factors. I am looking forward to hearing the other side and understanding what exactly the situation is and how the events transpired. And I am here with an open mind to come up with a solution that suits both of us. I request my counsel to just summarize everything I've said and help us set up the agenda as well. Counsel, if you could please.
Firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for making it to this table, and especially the mediators for explaining the process so very concisely. And I'd also like to mention that I have qualified authority to represent the legitimate interests of my client Don here. While I myself am here in an adversary capacity, I represent the legitimate interests of the government of India. And I'm here not only to protect the ministry's best interests, but also further its specific concerns. I'd just like to point out that the final decision-making power does in fact lie with Don. From our end, in the spirit of mediation at least, we would appreciate it if we could stay away from the technicalities of the facts leading up to this dispute itself, considering that we do have a paucity of time, so that we can make the most out of what we have. Now, we've made it to this table mindful of our interests, and at the same time, we would like to know what your version of the events are as they've panned out. With Akhil and Ray's help, we have the opportunity to come up with a solution that is tailored to both of our interests. And if a decision is reached, I would also request the mediators to summarize the same and maybe type the same out in the chat box. Now, given that we do, in fact, come from different countries, I would like to point out that we may have certain cultural differences that might manifest itself through our mannerisms or behavior. For example, when I nod my head, it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that I'm agreeing or disagreeing with you, but merely that we're understanding what you're saying. I understand that you might have attributes that we don't completely follow, but in the spirit of mediation, and given that we have come here in good faith, I request you not only to acknowledge these differences, but to move past them. Our very experienced legal team has had various meetings with Don Draper to discuss the facts of the events leading up to this mediation session. Now, as Don has mentioned, we are committed to maintaining our foreign investors' confidence in this country. Now, it is our understanding that the joint venture has set up a plant in the Bay of Bengal for the drilling of oil and natural gas. It is a matter of common knowledge that there are reports of a growing oil leak that we believe is a cause for concern. As Don mentioned, the oil spill is particularly worrisome as it not only affects the marine life around the Bay of Bengal, but also has more ramifications that are on the international level. It has snowballed into an issue that has to be rectified at the earliest. In furtherance of the same, I am keeping the legal arguments aside, given the mediated setting of the virtual table, but I will bring it up when absolutely necessary. If I do dwell on the legalities of the same, I request the mediators to kindly bring me back on track. With that being said, I'd like to move on over to the agendas that I'd like to set for today's session. Firstly, we'd like to talk about the liability that Deep Sea and Reliable have in regard to the oil leak, which is a cause for concern. Secondly, the specifics of the joint statement that would be released. Thirdly, we'd also like to talk about the mitigation measures that we will undertake to control the damage that has already been caused. And lastly, we'd like to talk about the compensation packages. Now, before handing it over to Avni and Anjali to put forth their side of the story, I'd like to end with a clarification where perhaps they can give more information on this particular oil leak and how the same took place. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you to the mediators for bringing in such positive energy in such a sensitive discussion today, and to Dr. and Mr. Don for being here today. Unlike the other usual times when we meet discussing the development strategies of our country, unfortunately, today we are here to discuss the tragic event, the oil spill that has taken place in the Bay of Bengal area. The reliable deep sea JV has spent a great deal of time in the Bay of Bengal region and in the incident command center in both India and the US. And let there be no mistake, I understand how serious the situation is. This is a tragedy, and the Bay of Bengal environment and communities are suffering. I fully grasp how the situation is perceived in our own country as well as internationally. We are determined to do everything in our power to contain this oil spill and to resolve the situation rapidly, safely, and as effectively as possible. We have maintained a good relation with the respected government of India and have been actively involved in serving our people and our nation, and we would like to continue doing so. I truly believe that the correct way forward is to hold a united front and to not engage in blame game for the sake of those who are affected and of course those who are involved. We are here today to think about our actions in the present and in the future, to think about our citizens and to take this as an opportunity of teamwork, research, and development. Thank you. Now my counsel can state her opinions on this and well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Anjali. Firstly, I would like to thank Mr. Mediator Akhil and Mr. Mediator Jay for agreeing to mediate this extremely pertinent and a pertinent session, which is going to affect the future that Reliance Deep Sea JV and Government of India have in as a relationship. And I would like to thank them for the succinct and crisp explanation of what mediation entails. I would like to wholeheartedly thank Dawn and Doctor for being present here today and for their interest in mediation. We completely understand that we are both here today following an extremely unfortunate event. However, we believe that both Reliance Deep Sea and Government of India have a common interest. And together, through this mediation session, we hope to come to an amicable solution on how to mitigate the aftermath of this mishap. My role here is an advisory one. I'm here to support my client from a legal perspective and help us all achieve results which will ensure maximum legal cushioning and minimum fallout from this very unfortunate event which has taken place. I do urge upon both the mediators to pull me back if I get caught up in legal jargon. My client has engaged me an Indian counsel to make sure that there is very little cultural differences. And I completely agree with what Counsel for the Government of India has stated. We are completely on the same point when it comes to cultural differences, and we are here on the same page, and we'll make sure that this mediation goes forward as smoothly as possible. While Miss Anjali and I understand your interest, we hope that our interest and our side is taken for as well. I would like to highlight that we would like to discuss the release of a joint statement, a compensation package, and mitigation measure, followed by potential solutions to the international backlash today at this mediation table. We are not interested. While we completely understand the Government of India's intention of discussing liability, we do believe that is something which would be beneficial for both the parties to be discussed at the end of this mediation rather than the beginning, because we do not want to get stuck in a cycle of blame game. Rather, maybe our joint effort together on how to alleviate the aftermath of this mishap is more important and pertinent to have a fruitful mediation. We really hope to get good results at the end of this discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, representatives from both the sides for your opening statements. From what we gather, the most important interest here for both parties seems to be the fact that there has in fact been an oil leak, and this oil leak needs. There's certain steps that need to be taken, both with respect to public image and possibly even with respect to the current mitigation measures itself. So, Mr. Co-mediator, I'm going to sort of lay down what the agenda is seems to be from both sides, and we have also understood from the joint venture side that they would not like to discuss possibly why the oil leak happened, considering it's a blame game, and this is definitely I would like your opinion on that. Personally, I believe that discussing about the oil, discussing about why it happened right now, possibly could be not very useful, considering that this is something that is very time bound. The oil leak has already happened. The public is already there. If we want some sort of progress to happen, possibly discussing the joint statement first, and then possibly mitigation measures and compensation, and then discussing why the oil leak happened might be better. But of course, Mr. Co-mediator, I would like to hear your thoughts, and of course the government's side, whether you would agree to this line of reasoning or whether it is important to understand for now why the mediation happened, and why sort of you would like to the oil leak happen. My bad. Over to you, Mr. Co-mediator.
Yeah, firstly, it's very delighted to see such positivity from your opening statement itself. But from what I've gathered from both the parties, from both the client and counsels, is that it seems like you're already past the past. I think it's also important to look at the future now rather than just beat around the bush and talk about the liability. But however, I as a mediator am prohibited from directing you to choose the agenda. But however, for me, it seems to for the betterment of this session and for the best outcome of this session, I think it's a good thing to talk about specifics of the joint statements first, talk about the compensation packages, and put forward both the offers from both the parties, then look at the mitigation measures, and then look at the liabilities. However,
Mr. Mediators, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Just a request from our side. We believe if we could discuss joint statement after we've discussed compensation packages and mitigation measures and what we are proposing to elevate the international backlash, it might be useful because then both the parties can be aware of what the joint statement might constitute. Because once we have discussed what is it that we can offer and how we can improve it, the joint statement might make more sense if the other party is also in agreement with it.
Yeah, I've taken that into consideration, but I would also like to hear from the other party as well about this.
Sure. Well, we're open to any and all discussions around all offers. Regarding our agenda of liability, I believe that is something that cannot be just slided aside, that put aside. It is a discussion that has to happen at some point in time. But I understand that if we start off with that discussion, this session might not be the most as fruitful as it could be. So I believe it's the agenda that has been set by the other party. We're completely fine with that. And as far as the question of liability is concerned, I believe that considering it is internal to all of the other agendas, I believe that is a discussion that will happen as we go along in parts. So I'm completely open to any and all offers.
Yeah, we understand both the parties' concerns, but just concluding about that, first we're talking about compensation packages, second mitigation measures, and thirdly specifics of the joint statement, and lastly liability. Is that all, or did I miss, or is there any discrepancy?
I think that sounds about right. I think both parties have agreed to that. So what I'm doing is I'm putting the agenda down in the chat box, and meanwhile,
so sorry to interject. We also had added our measures for handling the international backlash on an agenda. It was separate from the mitigation measures as well, domestically.
We'll put that out.
So then that can be the third agenda point after compensation and mitigation. Okay. Then what I would request, what I think would be right, Mr. Co-Mediator, is that we start off with the deep sea joint venture from discussing compensation, because they had they had told us that that's what they would like to discuss first. If that sounds fine, maybe they should go ahead with discussing compensation. Meanwhile, I will put the agenda down on the chat box.
Yeah, I think that's the best thing to do. Joint venture parties, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mediators. And thank you to the respected government officials for understanding that this is something that we should discuss first in order to take the discussion forward. So as stated by my counsel, first, I think it would be better if we could discuss the compensation packages. Now, as stated by Mr. Don earlier, the Reliable Deep Sea JV is a duo country joint venture where we have presence in India as well as the United States, and we completely understand the international backlash that the government officials as well as all others concerned might be facing because of this oil spill, and we truly believe that the fact that we are a joint venture will help us mitigate the same. So what we had discussed in our board meetings as well is that we propose to initiate a project in the Indian territory as well that will not only move away the focus from the oil spill. Of course, I can't expect that to happen immediately, but that is something that will show our sincere intention in the fact that we want to mitigate and we want to overcome this oil spill, and the fact that the JV allows us to pool our resources together and offer compensation to those who are genuinely affected. So I would like to take this moment to assure the government officials and the respected government of India that we are not shying away from offering compensation. Of course, this does not mean that we've automatically taken the blame, but we really do care about the situation that we have on hand here, and because we have been significantly part of the development of India as well, we truly believe that it is time for us to take this duty and to take care of those who are affected. So I would like to state clearly that we are looking forward to offering compensation packages to those who are affected, and we will cover all of it. There is absolutely no discussion about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Anjali. As pointed out by her, we are willing to cover all compensation packages, and this is not something my client is offering as a sign of fault or as a sign of feeling that it is on us. This is in no way an indication that we believe that the entire blame is on us, but rather this is a sign of goodwill, and we completely understand that the resources we have is extremely important to help a developing country like India. And for that reason, we want to cover all compensation packages and move ahead so that we can have a better relationship. And as pointed out by Ms. Anjali, Reliance Deep Sea JV is also looking to invest in further projects and invest in more environmental friendly projects, which is something we can discuss in the future agendas. But as regards to compensation packages, we would like to cover it all.
All right. First of all, I'd like to thank both the client and the council, and I do really appreciate the fact that till now the conversation has been very open, and the fact that you are willing to cover all compensation packages, which is a good step on your part, and we do appreciate that. Regarding the conversation about setting up a whole new plant and a whole new system, that is, I believe that is a conversation which should take place in the future, and this is not the right moment to have that discussion. Because considering the events that have transpired, I believe it is pretty open and it is pretty well known that the trust between both the parties is something that has substantially been affected. The faith that the government of India would have shown in the Reliance Deep JV has been affected substantially. So the question of having a completely new or a completely different project amidst all of this is that's a conversation that would, if it happens, it would happen far off in the future and definitely not at the moment. But I do appreciate the fact that you are willing to cover all the compensation packages. Because I believe regarding the legal aspect of it, even though that is not something we're definitely going to discuss, but considering the fact that that is something we still need to deal with, I believe my counsel is in a better position to discuss a few other factors. So, counsel, if you could please.
Right. Certainly, firstly, I'd just like to thank the other party for putting forth an option for covering the damages. I think it does show good faith on your side, and I think it has made some progress towards building more relations. But I think Don's primary concern here, along with the government of India, is, correct me if I'm wrong, if I do make a mistake, please feel free to correct me. What I'm trying to say is the joint venture already has 4 oil rigs, which is looking for capitalization on the extraction of oil. I agree with Don here, and I do think it's not a good idea to be working on an entirely new project, irrespective of how environmentally friendly it might be at the earliest. As he said, I think it's something that we can definitely look into at a later point of time. But right now, our focus is probably on mitigating whatever damages have taken place and to make sure that our image on the international front and the national front is shows us working together to make sure that a goodwill is reached and to make sure that compensation is given. Don, if you have anything else to add on to this.
Yeah, I sort of had a question about something the other parties sort of mentioned, wherein when they were talking about the fact that it is a dual arrangement with both a US company and an Indian company, and that they understand the international backlash that we would be receiving. My question is, considering the fact that your name also has significantly been involved in the whole incident, have there been any other parties or any other things that you've had to face within the other jurisdiction, which is the United States jurisdiction, that may or may not affect any conversation we have today?
If I like to clarify that for you, Mr. Don, there has been nothing as such in our jurisdiction, in the US jurisdiction, which can affect our conversation today. This is in fact a first for us, where there has been an oil spill, which is extremely regretted. And just to clarify, when my client stated that they are willing to invest further in the Indian economy, we did not mean setting up new projects, but rather, as you must be already aware, the Reliable Deep Sea JV has invested in Chennai Mega Emperors, the cricket team, and we would like to continue this relationship of investing in further many such projects which India has to offer. It was completely something we were offering as a sign of goodwill to show that we are very much invested in continuing this relationship forward. And it's not something we were talking about in terms of the oil fields at all. And in regards the I understand that there is some kind of, I can sense that there's some kind of tension which is there in terms of the liability and the responsibility. I think liability is a strong word to use in today's mediation session, which is extremely legal and technical and points to a fault. And my client was extremely hesitant about bringing up this point. But since I think it's important to clear the air so that we can have a more conducive discussion, I would like to bring in my client so that she can give her side of how the events transpired, so we can have a better discussion, if that is all right by the other party.
Thank you, Ms. Sharma. And apologies. I know we had discussed to, I know we had, confirmed that we'll not be talking about this. But after discussing the first point, I feel like we need to clear the air somehow. And as stated by my counsel, I was hesitant to bring it up. But I feel like both the parties require some clarification on what exactly happened in order to know how to mitigate it exactly. So I still don't know how to bring it up. But so broadly, the issue that caused the oil spill, at least from the structural part, is that there was a poorly constructed as a technical area in the whole plant. And so, of course, there are, approvals in place in the territorial country where you're operating to ensure that the plant is safe for operation and the plant is safe for the area where it is situated. So the approval of technical specifications of this project was done by my team, and we were very careful to ensure that we are abiding by everything that the approval states and its requirements. And my team has informed me that there was a site engineer who was an employee of the government of India, who approves the technical specifications regard to projects like ours, and he had approved the technical and the plant structure that we were operating in. And we were told that he has approved around 47 projects in the last month only. Now it's either two things: either it's the ease of doing investment business requirements that are easier in India since it's a developing nation. And while I understand that, I too feel like we can't singularly take on the fault for this. And of course, this is no blame game again, and we want to keep the relations as cordial as ever, and we want to focus on mitigation. There is no difference in from the original point of view. But I'd really like to clear the air with the government of India before we move forward. And I'd really appreciate if Mr. Don could let me know his awareness on this or his stance on this. Thank you.
Right, Don, if you don't mind, can I go ahead and hand it over to you? Yeah, I do understand that this is a mediation setting, and bringing in legal jargon, like the council did state, is not a good idea. But I mean, that being said, I feel like liability given to maybe the government of India or the joint venture in this case is extremely subjective. And I'm sure both the sides of this table can give two different interpretations for the same. So, I mean, I'm sure we can discuss about liability itself, but in regard to your statement about a government official approving construction plans, I think Don would be at a better position to answer this, considering he's well versed with the facts of the case. Don, can you provide some clarifications?
Certainly. Well, first of all, regarding the question that was posed, it was specifically regarding an engineer being present and being involved in the whole project. Well, first of all, the question of how many projects were approved in the past 1 month is irrelevant to the nature of the project that you had and whether your project was approved or not. Those 47 projects were different, and this is a different situation altogether. None of them had an oil leak, but this is the one that had, and this is the one that we're discussing. Regarding the fact if there was any involvement of the engineer, or if the engineer was at any fault in the approval of the project, that is certainly an internal matter that will be looked at by the appropriate committee. Whether the engineer was at fault completely is not a statement that I believe can be made at this stage. However, what can definitely be said at this moment is that there was an oil rig, there was a failure, and there was a leak, which is affecting everyone, especially the resources around the area. And the oil rig that was affected had a certain company's name on it, and that is the discussion that we're having at the moment. So going into the conversation about whether the engineer was at fault, even though the complete plan was yours, you had complete authority over how to operate it, and you were taking care of everything around the plan. I believe that is not the best conversation that we should be having at the moment, considering the already strained relations between both the parties. Council, if you have anything else to add on to that, and if you could also mention how there are a few other things that do affect the case that we are talking about today, specifically considering you're the Minister of Law. So if you could just highlight a few other things.
Right. Just adding on to what Don said, while I do understand that we might not want to dwell into liability as unnecessary as it might be, letting the joint venture of Deep Sea and Reliance off the hook in terms of liability tends to set a dangerous precedent for the government of India for various other future investors that might enter our markets, especially given that our ease of doing business index and its rankings have been dropping with respect to our ease in relation to due diligence. So I don't think completely dwelling away from the liability is a good option. I'd like to hand it over to the other side if Don doesn't have any other questions.
Mr. Don and the doctor, thank you for your comments. First, I'd like to clarify that we are in no position to ask you to let us off from complete liability. Of course, we are indebted to your country and the space that we are getting to operate. But I'd just like to reiterate that by me bringing up the engineer point, I was simply stating that the engine from the information that we have received as well from a very eligible team who does their due diligence as well, they have clearly stated that the 47 projects that I was talking about is in no way a depiction of the respected government of India's ease of doing business or how many projects that they're approving. It is simply that that single employee has been so overworked that he cannot feasibly and reliably approve specifications for so many projects. It's not as easy as checking things off a list. It's technical inspection, due diligence. And while I understand, and I completely understand that we are the JV, which is responsible for our own operations, as stated by Mr. Don and Mr. Doctor, I also believe that we are under the subject of your authority and your supervision, since territorially we are operating in your area. And of course, this is in no way a blame game. And I'm clearly, stating out my good faith here, and I'm stating it again and again that I'm not trying to, blame anyone. I'm just clearly stating that this is something that we should have a joint liability on. And of course, I'm not trying to say that let us off the hook or singularly any parties to blame. I'm just trying to say that there is some liability on both sides. Now, my counsel can come in if she has something to elaborate on.
Thank you so much, Ms. Anjali. Mr. Mediators, if I may, I believe that despite the fact that liability was something a little bit lower on the agenda, this is something extremely crucial for the other party, because even a clarification from my client is being met by counters from the other party. So if it is something, if both of you permit, then we can discuss this right now, because we do not want to break the flow of the mediation, if that is all right.
Thank you, Ms. Counsel. I do believe that during the agenda, we did set it at a later state. Of course, the parties did at some point decide that liability is something that was required to build trust. If we could just get a quick comment from Mr. Don as to whether you are okay with the sort of discussion that's happened so far. As we have sort of got some new information that there might be an issue from the side of the government, there might be an issue on the side of from the party, from joint venture as well. Maybe the best thing to do, you could go back, you could think about who did what wrong. But I would just like to again remind you that today, the reason we're sitting on the mediation table today was, of course, because there's a bunch of issues that will be possibly that can cause catastrophe to both sides if not resolved immediately. And in fact, we did come to an agreement on the compensation. And while you're answering that question, Mr. Don, I would also like to ask you just what is the number that you're putting on this compensation, just so that once so we kind of know how much you would also want. We have agreed to compensation, but having the specific details would help both parties much further. So just two questions with respect to whether you're okay with parking the liability issue for now, considering all the new information, and whether what is the number you put in the compensation. Before that, Mr. Co-Mediator, is there anything else you may like to add?
Yeah, I think that helps us expedite the process as well. If the parties are okay with it, I think I, as a mediator, I'm extremely happy if that works.
Surely. Well, regarding the change of the agenda to the liability, that is something that was sort of the primary agenda that we started off with in our agenda setting, and the only reason we sort of were accepted to move it towards the end is because we believe that the other side sort of had something that was very important, that was much more important than having a discussion about the agenda, even though we understood the fact that this will play a role around everything else that we talk about. The next question that some mediator asked was about the numbers of the compensation in place. Now, we are not representing a small company or any other, or a small body for that matter. We're representing a country which has billions of people. And the incident that has taken place definitely isn't, the effects of that is not limited to one country. There are other neighboring countries as well that share the same waters. This is an international incident. So the question of numbers around the compensation packages, I mean, we're not really here after the money. We're not here trying to figure out how much money we need to solve this issue out. The bigger question today on the table is where did what go wrong, and do we still have the faith to go on with any other projects in the future or anything at all? Because as I've mentioned again and again, the relationship between both the parties have been strained, and the only sort of bridging or an attempt to bridge the differences has been a small conversation about the compensation packages, which, even though I am really glad and I do really appreciate the fact that you've been very open in accepting about all and any compensation that will be required, but there are other things in the picture that need to be discussed, and certainly it's better if we have a discussion about the liability as well. Council, if you have anything else to add to that.
No, I don't think I have anything else to add on to that. I think you've summarized it perfectly.
Okay, then in my opinion, Mr. Don, considering we've already heard a lot about liability from both sides, possibly we break into a joint caucus at this stage, possibly have some time to think with both the parties. Mr. Co-Mediator, if you think that would be good at this stage of the mediation.
About that. Thanks for bringing it up. If both the parties are okay, I think a caucus would only help us a lot better to,
volunteers so that they can go ahead and give information about the oil spill. I think that's very important, that the community residing near the Bay of Bengal area understands that what is happening and how we are taking measures. And this is, of course, to reassure them that they can have full trust in the government of India, as well as the commercial businesses involved. And then this way we can improve our reputation domestically together and internationally as well. My counsel can come in and elaborate more on this, I think.
Thank you, Ms. Anjali. Firstly, I would like to thank Mr. Don for setting aside liability for now and moving ahead with compensation and mitigation according to our original agenda, because it really helps with this mediation. As Ms. Anjali has spoken at length about the mitigation measures which Deep Sea Reliable JV are offering and have started to undertake, I would like to reassure you that the kind of expertise and experience and resources that Deep Sea brings to the table, because of it being a US-based company, is unmatched, and we can assure you that the mitigation measures are underway, and we are completely on the same level to make sure that the measures are any kind of harm is alleviated. Secondly, something I would like to add is, since my client has a stake in CME, we are also considering talking to the key players of our cricketing team and advertising about the government of India, advertising about us, about the company, and reassuring the public that everything is fine. This is an unfortunate event, so that there is no trust lost in this country's government, and there is no harm caused to this government. We understand that liability and blame game is something we can both agree, and then the relationship can turn and sour. We both understand that reliable deep sea is an extremely important organization for this country's economy to continue blooming. And for that end, we are thinking of every measure possible to help the government. The cricket is a passion in this country, as we all know, and the cricketing team's captain and every vice captain, every other member who are so popular are also willing to engage in campaigns to promote environmental sustainability and to talk about the government's good measures and reliable deep sea's good measures in helping alleviate the situation, to help on a branding, to help with branding alongside the measures which my client has already talked about. Kindly do let us know what you think about the same.
One more thing that I'd like to add before we give the mic to Mr. Don is that where there are operations, where there is, a thirst and a curiosity to explore and to add more resources in a country, especially in a developing country, there will always somewhere or the other be, negative impacts of it as well. And this is in no way downplaying what has happened, and in no way, sliding off what has happened. But what I'm trying to say is that where there are positive additions to an operations, there can be rare negative occasions to that operation as well. One more thing that I'd like to ask Mr. Don is that now that we've laid down and answered his question about what we have done and what we can do, can he specifically let me know what else can be done to mitigate this? Thank you.
Right, if I may just respond to that question in a few minutes. Firstly, the incident that took place is obviously been known by the international community as a whole. And it's not just the oil spill, it is an internationally large environmental event. Now, while we do understand that the lax measures and regulations in India are a reason to maybe reduce the liability, so to say, we do understand that the regulations in maybe a different country somewhere else would probably be much more stringent. Now, I'd obviously like to say and thank the other side for putting forth a few options on how to mitigate the damages. And I think these are great ways to obviously go ahead with the problem at hand. But I think another concern that Don had was, does the joint venture company on both ends have anything else on their mind that they can do to make sure that an event like this doesn't take place again? Given that there are 4 different oil rigs that you are already working on, is there anything else that you're trying to do? Or we'd appreciate it if you could actually give us some assurance or any plan of actions that you have to make sure that something like this does not get repeated. Don, if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, certainly. In addition to that, well, there are a few things that I'd like to mention. One thing that the council sort of pointed out was the fact that the operations of the oil rig and of the company and similar companies like this are essential for a blooming economy for a country like ours. Well, I do take that personally, considering the fact that a country like ours is one of the biggest economies in the world. A country like ours has also been taking care of all of the flora and fauna and the resources that we've had for such a long time. And it was not a country like ours that sort of caused an oil spill that will be affecting numerous people, especially around the area. Now, I understand that not everyone in your company is directly associated or is well versed maybe with the geography and the history of the country, but just to remind everyone on the table that there was a problem. There have been issues in India, that significant issues in India, with big companies coming in and natural tragedies happening, especially things like the Bhopal gas tragedy, which still affects the people of this nation. And the area wherein the oil leak has happened, which is the Bay of Bengal area, is, if you are aware of the geography of the country, is the closest to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, which is also the area where we have islands, specifically islands where tribes who have not yet had contact with the rest of the world are managing to survive. There have been incidents where people try to have contact with them and it affected the tribal people there. So when a leak like this, when damages like this happen in such an area, the effects of that will definitely be remembered for a long duration. It is not something that can simply be dealt with by a small few PR stunts or having a few celebrities employed in the project. What I am still looking for is assurance from your end, because even though you have invested your money and your time in trying to mitigate the things that have happened, I still have this feeling and the sensation that we're not on the same page. So mediators, if you could, maybe this is the correct time for having a caucus, considering the fact that we're going around the same thing. So if you could just have a conversation about that. Thank you.
Yeah, this discussion has been going to and fro, but we as mediators also do not get your proper interests or what your real principles underneath are. And this will also help both the parties to cool down and think creatively, probably come up with new solutions in the meanwhile. Mr. Co-Mediator, do you think a caucus would be good now? I think it's
Yeah,
essential.
I think this is the right time for a caucus as well. Obviously these are mediation sessions, and these it's a process that will continue to keep going on. We have not really touched upon the joint statement or international backlash yet, and so I think today we can say the compensation has largely been addressed. Over to you, Mr. Co-Mediator, if you have anything to add before we give it over to the parties to make the closing statements.
Yeah, as I've already said, this session's been a little overwhelming and it's been to and fro here and there. But I think great things do take time to come to an end. And I think it's completely positive that parties have engaged in a proper discussion and have explored all the dimensions related to it. And honestly, I think the caucuses have been really helpful for us also to understand where you're coming from and what you're expecting from us as well. From the government side, all they were expecting was a little amount of responsibility from your side. And I know there's been some, I cannot say a word like misunderstandings and misinterpretations, but I do think there were different interpretations on both the sides of what happened in the past. But I do think, as a positive person, I feel that both the parties have been in consensus, but it has not surfaced upon like very clearly. I think the government side has also agreed to allow you for mitigation measures, and they've also agreed for a compensation, which amount would be, deliberated after a while. Government side, have I missed anything? If you could please confirm. Yeah, I see nodding heads from the client. I think the government has stepped down a little and agreed to. And joint ventures party, do you have anything to say or anything to comment on how the other side or we have been, or how you're feeling? Please.
Thank you, Mr. Mediators. I truly thank you both for initiating the caucus at time. It made us take a step back and made us understand what our interests truly are. I'm honestly a little dejected that despite all our suggestions and mitigation measures that we've repeatedly answered the questions of the government, that they have not taken even an iota of liability, and despite us specifying a very descriptive event which we are sure of that has caused the liability on their part as well. I'm a little dejected because it took us a lot of time to come here and effort, and both on both sides. Anyway, yes, of course, mediation is a process as stated by Mr. Mediator, and this in no way means that we haven't reached any sort of amicable solution. Of course, with respect to the compensation measures and mitigation measures, we'll do everything we can and everything we are for the citizens and our own country, India. Now, my counsel can elaborate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anjali. As a concluding remark to this mediation session, I would like to state for the record that me and my client are extremely dejected by the way the session has gone because of the litigious nature which has been adopted by the other side. We do not think of it as a sole responsibility and damages. It is a sign of goodwill that we wish to help the citizens of this country and make do all the losses. We would really appreciate it if the government would understand that we are in no way okay with taking up sole responsibility, and this is something which we share the responsibility with the government of India, and hopefully they will be more collaborative in the next sessions and also come up with solutions alongside us to help us mitigate the situation for both us, reliable deep sea JV and the government. As we know, and we will discuss in the future sessions, that international backlash, and domestic backlash is both something we do not want to face and do not want to be at the brunt of. So we do believe that the government can go back and discuss with their council of ministers and decide what is a better step to mediate and alleviate rather than blame. Really hope that it's a more fruitful session in the next session. Thank you.
Before I could allow the government side as well, I would like to tell to the Deep Seas Joint Ventures Party, please don't feel too dejected and frustrated. I think we have all the time in the world, and I see a lot of positivity from your end also, and I hope government side also comes from positive more motivations and mindsets from that also. Please don't feel this session has been completely not useful. I think we have had a lot of positives as well. Now I'd like to give the opportunity to the government side as well.
Right. Firstly, I'd like to thank the joint venture company for providing so many solutions. I think it makes great strides in the amount of dedication that you claim to have with respect to the projects. Over the past few minutes, I have spoken to Don and I have urged him to be slightly more open-minded, and I'm sure that the next time we have a mediation session, we might make more progress. And I'm sure even the mediators agree on this point, where it's a mediation setting and there are two different parties and there's obviously a gap. And I'm sure we've done our best to come as close as possible. And I'm pretty sure the next time we have a session, we take a few more steps closer. Don, if you have anything else to add on to this, you can do so.
I'm extremely grateful for both the parties and especially the mediators for facilitating this great conversation. It was definitely fruitful because we learned things that we were not aware of in the past, and it allows us it gave us information that we could work with even more. I understand that there was a difference of positions, but certainly from what I understand, mediation seems to be the best way to bridge those positions, because under any other circumstances or through any other mechanisms, the positions would be completely different. This is a great way for us to be on equal footing and have a conversation and try to come up with a better solution. Even though not everything was agreed upon, but the things that were agreed upon will help us achieve our final goal. So I'd like to thank everyone on the table.
Thank you to all the parties for coming to today's session. I do believe we ended on a good note. All the parties have agreed that we have made some progress forward. There's obviously been quite a tough session for all the parties to be in, but as Mr. Don rightly stated, there are a lot more options to consider that have come up today. There have been something that we have especially agreed upon. Thank you for choosing the method of mediation today. Possibly during the next session, we're going to make more progress. Over to you, Mr. Co-Mediator, before we end this session.
Yeah, certainly. It's very delightful to see such amount of positivity coming in the last times, but I think we are open to further mediations, and this issue is not over per se. And as I've already stated, I think we have all the time in the world to decide. However the serious the issue may be, I think we need to have more sessions, and we as mediators are completely okay, and really would be very glad if you choose us as your mediators. If that is all, I thank both the parties for making time and choosing us, and a happy Sunday evening as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, great session, everyone. I would hand over the stage to the judges now for the feedback.
Yeah, it was just a wonderful presentation. I think you people don't need a 40 hours training, mediation training. You're so well versed with every nuances of mediation process and what negotiation is in mediation, how the progress is to be made, and how the concern as to what are the barriers we are still unable to understand. Everything was being deliberated. Hats off to you. My big salute to all of you. God bless. Thank you.
If ma'am is done with her feedback, I would urge Thomas sir to proceed with his.
So we decided we don't give feedback in final rounds. We just wanted to congratulate and thank everybody. And so Push was speaking for all of us, but I added my 2 cents for clarification. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir.
All right then. Thank you so much everyone for tuning in. We will declare the results shortly. I would now request you to leave the meeting, and we'll send the valedictorian meeting link as soon as we can. All right. Thank you so much, guys. It's a great round.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much for the
Thank you, everyone.
feedback.
It was
Thank
really
you.
fun.
Right. See you.